Hey there, my name is Jason Bradley. You may recognize my voice from such places as the Community Solutions Podcast, which, by the way, you're listening to now. Before we begin, can I bend your ear for just a moment? We want to bring you the very best in quality and information each week. You can help us achieve that level of greatness. If you sell something, want to announce something, or try to convince others to vote for you, consider advertising on the Community Solutions Podcast. You can email us at commsolutionsmn@gmail.com, and we'd love to help you tell everyone about what you do. Once again, that's commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. Let us be your solution to increased sales. We thank you ahead of time for your consideration. Okay, enough yammering. On with the show. From over the hills and far away, it is the Community Solutions Podcast. I am Jason Bradley, and it is an amazing day here in Minnesota. So, of course, with me is Andrew Richter.
You say amazing and me in the same sentence? Happens all the time.
Does it now?
Well, that you saying it makes one.
Somebody has to be the first, I guess. Wow. We've been kind of busy lately. I mean, there's been a lot of things popping up from city to city, and it seems like the more we keep our ear to the ground, the more we're hearing, whether it's places like Edina raising the legal age to buy cigarettes, which blows my mind, or like we're going to talk about today with a place called Forest Lake. If you don't know, it's in kind of the northeastern part of the metro, just off of I-35, that decided that they were going to let their police department go in favor of using county police, and then not so fast. But we'll get into all that. Andrew, have there not been a ton of local things that have been popping up lately?
Well, it just verifies something we've been saying for 10 years now, that local is where it's at, that the sexy jobs are, in the Beltway, and they're in St. Paul. But the real decision-making, and the real impact on people's lives, I think, is in their own backyard. And it's the way government was envisioned. It's supposed to be the most important and the best people to solve a problem are supposed to be the people closest to a problem. And we've seen, and you and I have discussed for months now, the taking things from St. Paul and Washington and trying to get them passed locally.
Yes.
And whether that's minimum wage, whether that's e-cigs, whether it's the tobacco age, whether it's cap and trade, whether it's franchise fees or whatever, these issues aren't going away, and they're not going away anytime soon. So everybody argues for local control when they're in the minority, and I assume that that's going to do nothing but continue. So we're going to have this song and dance, this ring around the cities is going to be something that's not going away.
I would agree with that. And I wouldn't say it's anything new either. It's just that for some reason, because of the place that you and I fill, we're hearing about it a lot more, and therefore you're hearing about it a lot more. I would assume that you as a listener are hearing a lot more about these squabbles from city to city because you've got Andrew and I who keep our ear to the ground for you.
Well, and you're right. This is nothing different than's been happening since the beginning of time. It's just right now there's an added focus on this, and there's people. we've talked about things like franchise fees. We're going to get into a police department today. Those aren't new issues. Those aren't issues that cropped up last year. They're issues that have come to light because people are focusing on it now. And people are much more cognizant, I think, of their home value, their neighborhood, maybe more than ever before. What's being built around them,
right?
What the local school district's up to. It's become we're shining a light on something that should have been shined a light on a long, long time ago. Somehow it got off track. Somehow one-size-fits-all solutions from the bureaucrats in D.C. was all people wanted to talk about, and that's changed.
Well, and I think, too, local papers, local news media, it's different than it used to be. You used to get your local paper, I think, and again, maybe because of where I grew up, I have a little insight, but maybe not all insight. But you would see what's going on in your community, and they would report on the things that were happening. To the degree anything was happening with some cities. But now, I mean, I think a lot of the smaller places, like say around Duluth, get the Duluth News-Tribune, and a lot of the smaller places elsewhere in the state get the Star-Tribune from the Twin Cities. And even in Duluth, we would get the Star-Tribune. You could go purchase it, the early edition at a gas station or whatever. So there's always this allure to what's happening not here.
Well, and I would take it a step further than that often there is no news source for what's happening locally. And you talk about a local paper. Well, you want to know what's going on in Washington, there's a million different places to look. You want news, you want commentary, you want it from the left, from the right. You want it on social media, you want it on cable news, you want it on newspapers, tweetering. I mean, whatever you want, you can get your news from anywhere, and you can get your opinion from anywhere. I think there's a vacuum in local government that people like you and I are starting to fill, where there is a want for information, but there is not the choices to get your information from. And there's too much reporting after the fact. You and I have talked about that.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, last week at the city council meeting, your city council decided to make smiling a crime. Well, okay, wonderful. Where were you when that was discussed at a work session, and where were you when
Right.
And there's no analysis of it, which is also something that bothers me. There's no, people call it commentary or whatever you want to say, but I call it news analysis. I mean, you want somebody to regurgitate you the news. Well, I already know the news by 6 o'clock at night. I don't need Cronkite telling me what I already know. News analysis is what's filled that void. And I think that's lacking in local government, too, coverage-wise.
Right.
Here, the city's going to do A, B, and C. Well, the paper never says, is this good or bad? Is this...
or at least what the consequences may be, positive or negative.
True, and you can save one of those for the opinion section and one of those for the news section, or put it on the editorial page. But it just kind of, I think it's too the vetting, the scrutiny, that we put on St. Paul and Washington. I don't think we've put on local government, and that's left, right, center, whoever. I think it's been lacking, and I think if it feels like people are more informed, I think it's probably a combination of all of the above.
I agree with that. And let's start to get into the meat and potatoes a little bit here, just to fill in the backstory.
About Forest Lake, you're talking about.
Yeah, about Forest Lake. And again, if you're in any city, and we used to say in Minnesota, I would say any city in the country, I mean, you are going through a lot of the same things. And this is because you have a National League of Cities that pushes to your State League of Cities that pushes out to your city councils. They share best practices, they share tips and techniques and sample legislation and workshops, and so
You can major in this in college now.
You can. Yeah.
City planning. That's
city planning, city management.
Yeah.
That's a major in a college. So looking at this isn't really about Forest Lake, what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about, first of all, what happened in Forest Lake, just so that you have some context. But we're going to get into more of the nuts and bolts of A, how did it come to this? B, what is coming out of it? And then C, really, what do we make out of it? You know, and those are very important questions to know how we got here, what this means, and then the whole process and the like theoretical analysis behind all of it.
Right, which again you're not going to get from the local newspaper. You're not going to get it from anybody covering the story. Mm-hmm. They'll just cover somebody hyperventilating at a meeting about their cat's in the tree and they can't call somebody or something. And you have to give an unemotional response to this.
What?
It's hard for some of us, but
well, I try. I'm in classes for it.
Little anger management.
Jack Nicholson and I are like this. So.
Yeah, he taught you on The Shining, right? Might I ask why you do that? Yeah. I mean, Forest Lake voting to dissolve their police department, and now the latest development is that might not happen. Is we should set the stage a little bit. There are I would say pretty much most of the municipalities in the 7-county metro have their own police department.
Yes.
There are exceptions to that.
Yeah.
There are some smaller places rather than bigger places. I don't know off the top of my head all of them, but there's some in Washington County where Forest Lake is. They're on the outskirts of the Twin Cities. There's a lot of places, a lot of small towns that will use in townships that will use the nearest county, maybe the nearest big city's police department in some sort of shared service.
Right.
That's understandable and practical. The move here in Forest Lake, for some reason, has garnered more attention than other cities that have done this.
Yeah.
For some reason, this has become kind of a social media blew up on this, and you posted something about it and got a back and forth discussion. I'll just be kind here.
Yeah, well, a friend of mine that I've known for a long time, since I lived in Duluth, actually got a hold of me. And, well, actually I saw that he had posted something on Facebook, and he and I had a little discourse about it. And, I thought this is a great thing for everybody to know without me putting any kind of judgment on it, good or bad. I wanted to see what people said.
Right.
And the feedback that we got was pretty interesting.
Well, it's pretty mixed. I mean, there's cities are going to go through this. I mean, with defined pensions and union workers, you're going to hit a wall at some point where you unions at some point are going to collapse under their own weight. And if you give a city a choice of endlessly funding something in somebody's retirement and blah, 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 at some point they're going to search elsewhere. I mean, they just like the private sector has. I mean, I think everybody seems to, well, maybe not everybody, but almost everybody seems to agree that it just indefinitely can't just throw money at this.
Right.
That at some point, and this is how shared services started happening in Minnesota. This is, in a sense, this isn't anything new. But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Why has Forest Lake, why do you think this has become such a big deal? Because this seems to have galvanized the city. It's Channel 4, Channel 5. Not the most accurate reporting
11
on either.
Fox, they're all reporting on it.
All reporting on it. Why? I mean, why is Forest Lake, is this a tipping point? Are all these cities this size going to now start doing this? Is the county really equipped to be the city law enforcement operation. I mean, why has this issue become so big?
Well, and that's a great question. I think that people are, and by people, I mean city councils especially, are noticing that it's getting expensive. They keep wanting to raise taxes in some avenues, and they're looking for a way to maybe not cut costs so much as stem the increase, because with your union employees, and that's going to be all of your city staff, not just police, not just fire, you're going to have increases every year. And you can't get a handle on that. And you can't have those increases in benefits every year, plus spend more money on parks, spend more money on bike paths, spend more money on buying up land for mixed-use development, and keep costs under control. And
especially in cities that aren't growing.
Oh, right.
Cities that are growing can
maybe
do
a little
that,
more, because you can defray the tax base a little bit.
Right. And you have a new tax base popping up that maybe you didn't have 10 years ago.
Right, but in a developed city, you don't have that.
Developed city, you can only grow vertical so much. And then people start abandoning the city because it's not what it was. I don't know why it's happening, that this has become so big. But it's the feedback that we've gotten has kind of, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. Because now the latest development is that this might not happen, and that the PD might reach an agreement. I don't see how this agreement saves money, which I thought was the point. And at Forest Lake, I don't know why you've made a decision to do this and now you pull back. It's the city council's operated pretty strangely here, and I don't know anybody on that council. I wouldn't know them if they were, they walked down the street and they, robbed a bank. I wouldn't know who they were. But it seems like they reached a decision to do something and then immediately yanked it back. And then now, all of a sudden, there's a new proposal on the table.
I would argue, though, this is how things should work.
Yeah.
I think this is what it looks like when you legislate and you're not under the cover of work sessions that nobody listens to or goes to. I think that if you were to examine what happens in the chorus of following city legislation from the point that it's introduced to the point it gets accepted at a council meeting or dies in work session, I think that you would see a lot of the same things. And because this is happening so real time in front of our faces, with talking with the union and having to go back and forth, that is why it seems like there's some bad choices happening too, where it's,
it also seems,
we can't make any progress. Oh, wait, maybe we can make some progress.
Do you think it was a negotiating tactic?
Oh, I absolutely think it's a negotiating
But see, this
tactic.
is the thing that I don't understand. You don't just decide to dissolve a police department on a Monday morning somewhere. This was obviously planned for a long time. You'd have to sit down with the county and negotiate this and that. I mean, this was obviously in the works for a while. And it feels like the community up there was caught off guard. I mean, you say this is how it should work. No. The community should have been involved in the discussion a year ago.
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're seeing playing out
They're
now,
reacting to the people who voted for or against them. And
from a community standpoint, that's true.
Right. And my guess is these people are going to have some opponents.
Right.
Next year.
From a council standpoint is what I'm saying, though, where in work sessions, that's where the back and forth happens, and we're seeing it happen kind of in front of our eyes now, which is what's different. And because, it's so public and it's kind of nasty right now because they did not get the public involved early on, and they try to do it the way a council always does it, handling it in work sessions, not telling anybody what they're doing.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Where is the city council going to learn this?
From you and I.
Yeah, but I mean... Is there a city council, forget Crystal for a minute.
Right.
Is there a city council anywhere that is going to understand that you can't, if you don't sit down with people and say, here's why we're doing something. Here are the consequences if we do this or that. Here are the benefits, and here are the maybe things that may be worse. I mean, every action has consequences, whether they're good or bad. And you just decide to make... I mean, clearly, this decision was made before this meeting.
Yeah.
You can tell because the public was like 99-1 against this.
Yes.
And the council basically said, well, we've talked about it. So you could see that the decision was already made.
Yeah.
And how many examples of this are you and I going to bring out here and say, listen, you people, you got elected by this group of people that's in the audience here?
Yeah.
When is that ever going to get across anybody in office?
Well, and I'm going to say this, that this reminds me exactly of our situation in Crystal. There was an issue. It brought the community together. The community was against it. They voted for it anyways with dissension, right? Because there was dissension in that room as well. The council was split.
But the majority was for it.
Right. The majority was for it, but the council was split.
But we all know what happened. They reached
all
a
lost
deal.
Their job.
Yeah. Eventually they all got beat. But they had reached a deal before we ever got in to talk to people.
There were maps. There were projected drawings of things.
Where do you think that came from? Was it made that morning? No.
Hennepin County spent thousands and thousands of dollars getting this stuff prepared. Tens of thousands of dollars.
But that's just it. I mean, it is make the plans and then try to sell them to the public.
Right.
Not, hello, public, what would you like? Okay, let's craft your opinion in with blah, blah, blah. I mean, you'd think I couldn't be surprised by this anymore. But I'm still surprised that, because the council, the people who were for this, and again, we'll get into the reasons you should or shouldn't be, and we'll leave it up to you folks to decide. I mean, everybody is probably going to have this conversation in the next decade or so about either combining a police or whatever. I mean, but, when is the mindset on elected officials ever going to change?
When they're replaced with people with a fresh mindset.
I guess so, because the people who were for this seemed annoyed. They seemed, I'm not going to say they were disrespectful to the people. I didn't see that.
No.
But they seemed to be like, hey, come on here. We've talked about this for a year. I mean, they didn't say it in those words, but it's kind of like, well, wait a minute here. Public found out about this last week, okay? and look, people don't have time to listen to every single work session. Where was the article in the local paper? Hey, look, we're considering doing this, If you want to participate in it, where were the open houses?
Right.
Where were the opportunity? Where was the city surveys? City finds time to do a survey when they ask a bunch of leading questions, outsource it for $50,000 of your taxpayer money. But then you're going to dissolve a police department, and it's a process like this.
I'm going to tell you, one of the best things that ever happened in Crystal was the recording of work sessions, and we have learned so much from those work sessions. And I don't know.
Borrowing.
Yeah. Oh, my word. Or anything that might be coming up in a future article about John Budashevsky.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, anyways. That I don't understand. Cities borrow from each other all the time. And this is why it hasn't passed. We need to get some new blood in there to say, okay, we're recording these work sessions, because it's just not... That's not catching on from city to city, because people are seeing, oh my word, look what happened in Crystal. We have to be accountable for what we say in these things. Because what did Mark Hoffman say about these work sessions, or was it Mark or was it Joe, that this is where we get to be ourselves. This is where we get to really say what's on our minds. Right. This is what you should know what's on their minds. That should not be a question. Yeah, you have freedom to freely discourse and all that kind of stuff, but I'm sorry. If you feel a certain way about it, the public should know they elected you.
Well, and it's forming a quorum, and anytime there's a quorum, it's supposed to be. And I don't think open to the public means I've got to drop what I'm doing and attend these things.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
not in this day and age.
Well, yeah, I mean, here's my question. You're at a city council meeting, okay, which is on TV.
Mm-hmm.
When that's over and they go into a work session, why can't they just stay there?
Yeah. Keep the cameras rolling.
Why?
Most of them are on the same nights as council meetings anyways.
I'll never understand it. I mean, it just tells you that I think the truth is they don't want people there. I mean, I think the truth is the more people who attend them, the in their minds, the worse that is. They'll chastise people for not coming.
Right.
But the truth is the Renee Bowman types, they don't want anybody there.
No.
Maybe they won't say that, but there's no way they want people there. So, you know.
They make it as difficult as possible for you to learn what goes on in those meetings.
It's like reading the comprehensive annual financial report. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's online. Oh, great. But
yeah.
I got to hire a tax auditor to tell me what this means. You know, but bringing it back to Forest Lake. Okay, so Forest Lake's a city of 18, 19, 20,000, somewhere along there. Whatever estimate that it's going to get to, which we know is wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
So now they had 25 officers now, was that? And I imagine they had record keepers.
Oh yeah, the
jail assistants,
clerks. They had, had like
Police
Crystal, where it's layered. You have a chief and sergeants, officer, and detectives, and
patrol, community service, that kind of stuff. Okay, so the bigger subject to me is not so much what's going on in Forest Lake, but what may be going on elsewhere, and whether dissolving a police department and using the county, in this case Washington County, is a good idea or a bad idea.
Okay.
What you mentioned, we've done some social media on this. Mm-hmm. What's the kind of feedback that we've been getting? I mean, and I've seen some of it, but I mean, what? Because I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
And I won't lie. I mean,
do I. Yeah.
Get into my opinion, I guess, on this. But, I mean, what's the, Jay, have you played devil's advocate here?
Okay.
What is the argument for doing this? I mean, what's the argument of not having a local police force and having the county be the law enforcement agency in your community?
All right. Well, I mean, if you're looking from more of a libertarian type philosophy, less government is a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. Versus having more government, less spending versus more spending, and that's the one that the city's using. I don't think they realize, or intend for it to be a libertarian argument.
You think?
I think that libertarians maybe are hopeful that there will be less enforcement when you spread a county out, to do more work. And I'm not saying that's good or bad either, because as you know, there are a lot of things where maybe things shouldn't be as enforced as heavily as they are, or speed traps, things like that. Terrible ideas, revenue raisers, things like that. That's just a waste of money and time, and maybe at that point you have too many police officers, or you have them doing things that maybe they could be used better somewhere else. So those are some of the reasons.
So the basic argument is you have fewer people working for government, you have less money being spent, even though you do have to contract with the county. I mean, the county doesn't pick up the whole tab. And
then less force.
And then, or more freedom, hopefully.
Right.
Okay. Now, let me play devil's advocate the other way.
Okay.
And I'm not going to pick on libertarians or conservatives or anything like that. But we've talked on this program a million times about how local control, the lowest form should be where the money's at, if you will.
Right.
This is going in the opposite direction.
Okay.
How do we hold Washington County if I'm in Forest Lake? Now, I'm in Forest Lake, and there's been 2 break-ins on my my street. Is Washington County now going to patrol that, or you know? You have. I guess here's my question: how do you hold Washington County? How does the city council,
right,
anybody else, hold them accountable when they aren't in charge of them? I mean, it's not like you can take away their contract and contract it out with somebody else,
right? I mean,
you're in Washington County.
Yeah, it then becomes, which I mean, I guess really is a democratic measure that the sheriff is elected, so you don't like what the sheriff's department is doing, elect a new sheriff. You don't like,
theoretically,
how the county manages all of that, you elect new county commissioners.
Boy, that's not easy.
No, it's
and
not.
And that's slow change. I mean, you've got the city has no control over who is an officer.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's my thing. I like having your own police department. And I think the better thing for Forest Lake would have been to combine with another city if that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, I think you lose accountability here. For a Forest Lake problem, Washington County is who you have to call now.
Right.
So if there's a problem in Forest Lake with whatever, name your issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, is the county going to want to get involved in all the city minutia? And then the other part comes, because we've dealt with this, where county law is not necessarily being enforced by the local police department.
Right.
I won't mention cities or issues, but the county passes a law. It's really up to them to enforce it.
Mm-hmm.
The city doesn't want to. They can tacitly not do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. Hennepin County, you can't smoke in a park. It's not the county park, it's a city park.
Right.
But the county passes a law, and a city could say, hey, yeah, you want that law, you go enforce it.
Yeah.
Well, now with the local police department, you can't do that.
No. And I would argue county law should not...
Counties have really overstepped their bounds.
They have. To say what goes on in a city park, to say what goes on in a county park, fine. But to say what goes on in a city park, I mean, you really have to leave that up to local authorities.
Yeah, I think so, too. And look, here's the thing. And for people who believe in smaller government, do I believe in smaller? Of course I do. Okay, I'm not arguing to keep big government. I mean, to me, what your local police force is doing, how many you have, how much they're getting paid, that's one issue.
Right.
That's not the same as not having a department.
Mm-hmm.
What the police department is, how big they are, what they're doing exactly. To me, I worry that this is going to spread and that counties are going to become law enforcement only. And for a problem in Crystal, I have to call Maple Grove, or how many times have we just called up Julie Deschler and asked her about something? She went to whoever, got back to us, either had a resolution or a question answered.
Yeah.
How's that going to work if it's Hennepin County?
And I'm going to argue as well that when you get into county enforcement, now this works out in greater Minnesota a lot of times, where we see a sheriff that is responsible, his department's responsible for a number of cities, number of townships, whatever. The laws tend to be a little simpler out that way too, and I think that if you had Hennepin County sheriffs that have to memorize or be able to look up, do I have to write a citation because there's
a parking ban here and there's not one
and
there.
Not one there. Your firewood pile is too close to your border. Your garage is too tall. All of this stuff that they're going to have to rely then on city inspectors and have a partnership there, and it really is kind of a tangled web.
Well, and that's the thing. Why have a city code if the city has no means to enforce it, or,
right?
Why not just take it and burn it?
Well, exactly. Then I mean, why don't?
And
we
then
just
you might say, oh, well, that's great. But here's my take on it. let's say that the county has a ban. The county decides to ban parking in Forest Lake streets. Mm-hmm. We're going to enforce it. Well, you contracted out law enforcement to Washington County.
Mm-hmm.
What's the city council going to do? You can pass a well, fine. You don't enforce the law here. We do.
Yeah.
And I'm a Forest Lake citizen. Just say I am. Mm-hmm. I can't go to my city council because they're going to sit there with their thumb up their arse and say, well, sorry, we contracted out law enforcement, so go talk to your county commissioner. Well, okay. go elect a new sheriff in 3 years. You know, I mean, my question becomes, you have the lowest form of government, to me, loses. And some people might say, well, that's good, less laws. You're not necessarily having less laws.
No.
Because the county's in charge.
Or better laws.
Yeah, you might have stupider laws.
You might, and they might be more heavy-handed because you've got a bigger government pushing down on a smaller entity.
Yeah, and they don't care. They don't live in your community.
No.
I mean, if somebody in Washington County can live anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they don't serve the residents of Forest Lake. So I don't know. I mean, I get it. But I keep coming back to this. If you want to reduce the size of government, okay, if you really want to reduce that, you've got to do something about what government does, how much they pay people, what the role should be, generally speaking, with regard to development, with regard to debt, with regard to capital funds and expenses, water, that kind of infrastructure. If you're not, here's the thing. If you can't cut government if you don't believe government should have a smaller role.
Right.
Then it's impossible. You can't say, I want government to do every single thing they're doing, but I want the cost cut in half. No, it's never going to work that way.
And I think there's a lot of ways. I mean, operating costs take up the greatest part of a city budget. And so maybe you don't need as many sergeants or as many lieutenants in your police department, but you still need the police department. Maybe you don't need as many officers. Maybe you don't need a finance director and you should contract that out. Maybe you don't need an assistant city manager, just a city manager.
Or assistant city forester.
Yeah, maybe you don't need a city development director and a city planner. Pick one.
Well, I've said before, why does a developed city need both? No one gives me an answer.
Right. There are ways to cut costs without having to get rid of a police force. It almost seems to me like...
It seems to me like they don't want to do the hard work, which is to go in there and pick apart everything. They want to... And you know what? Here's the thing in Forest Lake. Okay? I'm going to tell you something. 25 officers. That's about what Crystal has.
Right.
You know what Crystal's police department budget is?
I forget off the top of my head.
It's like $4.5 million.
Yeah.
Now, Forest Lake says they're saving $400,000. Now, Crystal, if you save $400,000, that's not even 10%.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to pay out to the county,
right.
And I don't know how much. The county's going to have to hire more officers.
And the county, it's only going to go up from there.
And so my big question, is that then spread among the whole county? And if so, why is the county paying for the extra officers to support one city's decision? That's not very libertarian either.
Yeah, I would imagine it is being spread to a certain extent. I mean, there's no way you can just isolate it to Forest Lake and say only these 10 officers can go to. There's no way you can do that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is a problem, and I think that, like I say, I mean, I don't know what the biggest city is near Forest Lake, but wouldn't a better alternative be like a shared police department with a neighbor?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of cities. I mean, you got Wyoming, which is right there to the north. You got Columbus, which is just to the west.
Is a different county.
It might be. Is that Anoka County across 35? You've got
north of that is Isanti, I believe.
Okay. They might be in Isanti County. And then, you've got Columbus, which I don't know. I would assume that's in Washington County. You've got
Lino
Hugo,
Lakes,
Lino
Centerville.
Lakes. Yeah.
They're a little south. There's not much. You'd have to go up to Chicago
City, yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Lindstrom.
well, it's a tough issue. I respect the fiscal end of it. I mean, I do. I know it doesn't sound like I do, but I question whether practically that's
your first go-to cut.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I was going before, is that it almost sounds to me like it's a little like we want to shock the system. We don't really mean this, but we want to make a point that if we cut money out of the budget, you're going to get upset because you're going to lose services. But
I personally, and this is just me, I think there's a large percentage of the population that gets that. You know, I think there are some people who want everything for free and they don't want to pay for anything else. But I think most people understand if, I spend less at the grocery store, I'm probably going to take home less food.
Right.
I think if somebody would just make that argument and say, look, I'm hearing on the one side you want lower taxes and less government. Here's a way we can give this to you.
Yeah.
We're open to other ideas. I never see it phrased like that.
No.
You just don't.
No.
And I think if you want to keep going on cutting government, I hate to pick on Park and Rec, but there should be a limit to Parks and Recreation. When did we look to government to go entertain us in playing soccer or playing, why is it that only they can organize something or only they can tell you what goes on at a park you're paying for? I mean, I'm not saying cut it necessarily. I'm saying, why is it that we look to the city to do every single thing recreational-wise? It's almost like nobody can get together unless the city does something and promotes it with your tax dollars.
Little League seems to do a fine job of that. And why there aren't things like that for other sports or activities, I don't know. Maybe there's just not the demand for it.
Right, but if there's not the demand for it, then why is the department so big?
Exactly.
Why is it as big as it was 20 years ago if recreation is half of what it was?
Now, to play devil's advocate, if people in the community want to pay for those things, then I guess it's their right to do so. What kind of community do you want to live in? And blah, 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 blah.
But I go back to thinking outside the box here.
Right.
Okay? I'll pick on Crystal again. We have, 28 parks in a 6 square mile city?
Yeah.
Now, you and I both know some of those parks look good, some of them don't. Some of them are being used, some of them aren't. Demographics have changed. Not all the kids are playing baseball anymore. And I'm not arguing to tear them down and put up condos or something like that. But we should have a vision of, 20 years ago, we needed this many ball fields.
Right.
20 years from now, we might not. What should we do, public? What would you like to see? Because remember, that's land not generating revenue.
Right.
Okay, keep that in mind. So, unfortunately, the attitude I got, especially when I ran for office, was, get rid of a couple parks, just not the one by my house. That was typically the attitude. So how do we break through that attitude? There's parks that we're going to have to put money in, or they're just going to fall apart. So it's... but that's what we elect people to make tough decisions. I mean, I go back to that. We elect you to do that. We elect you to take the from people. You're going no matter what you decide, you're going to have somebody ticked off. But going back to the shared services stuff here, I mean, I'm torn as to where to stand on this. I don't know if, and maybe it's my. how do I put this? Dislike or distrust for Hennepin County.
Yeah.
That makes me really, really concerned. And the feeling that problems in a city are going to get further away from you.
Right.
While understanding the financial implications of doing either.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where to stand on this.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I mean, there are good and bad things about it. I mean, our fire department between New Hope and Crystal seems to work pretty well. I know there are a lot of fire departments out in greater Minnesota that handle things, at a not necessarily a county level, but they share services among towns and townships.
And some are volunteer.
Some are volunteer. Yeah. Yeah, and so I think that there are advantages to that. When you get into law enforcement, maybe those are a little less so, the advantages. And that's where you kind of get into some of the force issues, the enforcement issues, if you will. And you touched on briefly how you can choose to not enforce certain things. And I just want to make sure that we hash that out, because there's quite a debate about that going on, whether it's marijuana laws, whether it's e-cigs, whether it's sanctuary cities. How do we take a stand on some of that? Because some of that is right versus left issues, and it's, I support this, but I don't support that, so that's okay.
There's a lot of inconsistency.
Yeah.
It seems to be. I mean, and I've taken a stand personally that if you don't want to enforce county law or state law, I think local government should have that right. I think what they shouldn't have is the right to obstruct justice. For example, there's a farm growing marijuana somewhere.
Right.
City doesn't want to do, hey, we don't have laws against marijuana in the city. And technically, it really isn't up to them to do that.
Right.
But they shouldn't get in the way of the state and federal government coming in there and enforcing their law. And if you don't like the law in the state and federal, you work to change it. Mm-hmm. And to me, you mentioned sanctuary cities. The reason I think that, first off, I mean, if a city doesn't want to enforce immigration law, I don't think they have to. However, they shouldn't be obstructing the federal government from doing so. There's a building where there's 100 illegal aliens there, and you prevent the federal government from knowing about it. You're a law enforcement officer. You swore to uphold the law. That's obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying you have to go do it, but to not alert, hey, ICE, there's a building over there with a bunch of illegal aliens there. Okay, we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But to actually have orders to stand down. I've said this before. If Minneapolis was a sanctuary city for deadbeat dads or rapists or sex offenders, everybody, those very same people would be going, or income tax evaders, those very same people would be going absolutely crazy.
Absolutely.
And rightfully so. I'm the one who's being consistent here. If they don't want to enforce it's not Minneapolis' job to enforce income tax. But it's also not okay for them to get in the way of the IRS, as much as we hate them, enforcing tax law. Right?
That's correct.
So, but you're right, though, when I'll bring it back to our discussion, you're right, though, when it comes about, local law versus county law. Say, like I said, say Forest Lake doesn't have a parking ban overnight. Say the county decides to make one.
Right.
Well, the local government can say, okay, county, you go drive up and down the streets. We're not gonna. We got other things to do.
Right.
But Forest Lake now has no say. There's no way to, if this were to go through, which doesn't look like it's going to, they wouldn't be able to do the little things and they couldn't make their own laws. Let's say that the city decides they want that. The citizens, okay, we don't want cars being parked on the street for whatever reason. I mean, whatever. What are they going to do? Okay, they can pass it, but they don't have any law enforcement wing to it.
Right.
What's Washington County going to now chive in and enforce that? I mean, if they don't want to, and
right.
Let's say, where does the money go? Where does the fine go? Mm-hmm. It's Forest Lakes law. Washington County's enforcing it.
Right.
What happens then? So I think
60-40 split.
Who gets the 60? Then they're going to harangue about that for a while. So I think, and obviously I'm sure stuff like that's been talked about, but I don't know. I have pretty big mixed feelings with a city that big. Mm-hmm. 20 and growing. I mean, I think Forest Lake's going to get bigger rather than get smaller. Mm-hmm. I don't think it'll grow at the rate, of course, that everybody thinks. Nobody ever does.
Right.
The Met Council hasn't been right since Moby Dick was a minnow, but it makes law enforcement pretty murky there.
Right.
And so,
I want to bring up one other, and again, I think this shows when you base things on principle, it's easier to look at it differently than when you base it on emotions or this or that. You and I have always said, Andrew, that the best government is the one that governs closest to you. Yeah. That's why we say we want wards in every city instead of at-large elections, because you have somebody that lives in your neighborhood that represents you. Yeah. Now, I would argue that from a policing enforcement standpoint, that there are advantages to having government closer to you than further away as well.
Right. And, again, just the other aspect comes, you got a city manager that hires a police chief. Mm-hmm. Not the way I would do it in the perfect world,
right.
But you have city council that can make a directive to the city manager that can make a directive to the police.
Right.
You have a police chief that is at least being held accountable by somebody.
Right.
You've got people underneath them, and they're in charge of who's hiring, who's, who represents that community, and what they're doing, and you outsource it to somebody. And like I said, you're subject to what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So, and what if after they sign a 5-year contract or whatever it is, and what after 10 or 15 years this isn't saving any money?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's not like hiring a law firm where there's 200 of them in the phone book.
Right.
You live in one county. I mean, Isanti County's not going to come in and force. I mean, who's going to do it?
Right.
So you're now, a city is now just at the, I don't want to say at the mercy, but they're at, and what if it doesn't work? You're going to rehire everybody?
That's going to be expensive.
Buy police cars again? Buy all the equipment that a police officer has?
When they were looking at forcing the split of West Metro Fire, do you remember any of the numbers on that? Because it was going to be expensive.
I don't remember the numbers, but it was like going through a divorce. Mm-hmm. You had, I'll give you a couple examples. Yeah. You had 3 fire stations, 2 of them in Crystal.
Yeah.
So Crystal's paying 50% on 3 fire stations.
Yeah.
They would have had to pay 100% on 2.
Right.
Okay, you have 1 fire chief for 2 cities. Now you need 1 for each.
Right.
You got 1 deputy fire chief for 2 cities. You just imagine how it's going now. Mm-hmm. You have all the uniforms.
Yep.
West Metro Fire.
Gone.
Throw them in the garbage and I'll get new ones.
Right.
And technically what I had heard from sources close was that everybody would have to, because this is what happened when the fire department became one.
Yeah.
Everybody basically got fired and you had to reapply for your jobs. Mm-hmm. And it led to about a third of the firefighters leaving or retiring, or some of them were only doing it part-time, on call. About a third of them decide. We probably lost some good, even though I think it was the right decision in the long run.
Yeah.
We probably lost some good officers over that, some good firefighters.
Probably.
I said, you know what? I'm not reapplying for this. I do this part-time. I'm not going to go under a new chief and it's not worth it to me.
Right.
So they just said, all right, I'm not doing it. And they probably would have done it had it continued. And I still think that was the right decision back in the 90s. But, something might look good on paper, but it's the other people that have to go make it happen.
Right.
Which was always the problem with West Metro. First off, it wasn't a cost savings. No way anybody could make that case.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to take everybody from the fire department, have them lose their jobs and reapply. So, and look, I'm no fan of New Hope City Council. I can understand how they might be awful to deal with, and most of them are largely still there, maybe with the exception of one person.
Yeah.
So I can understand that from a standpoint, but I've said this, Crystal made no case that had to happen. Mm-hmm. No case whatsoever. And I go back to, it was all our former mayor, it was all a power trip.
Right.
It was all her ego. And in the end, it probably cost the fire chief his job. Mm-hmm. And for what? What did we get out of it?
Right. I mean, nothing.
Tell me one positive thing that came from it.
Well, I mean, other than the mayor losing her job.
Yeah. And everybody else who voted for that's gone too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was, and again, that was another decision made, work sessions. Mm-hmm. I mean, when it hit, it came out of nowhere. Nobody knew about it. Even the fire chief didn't know about it.
Yeah.
New Hope didn't know about it. It was done very poorly, and it was typical of the old council.
Right.
They're the lords and masters, and we should just follow them and never question what they're doing because they're so smart and we're so stupid.
Right. And so, I mean, tying that back around then, to create a shared service and then disassemble it later, that's really expensive on a community. And a lot of times it happens because, as we kind of see in this Forest Lake case, that the city council had a beef with the police department. They used it as probably a negotiating tactic because they didn't like the contract that was being offered by the union, and they wanted to force the union's hand a little bit to whether it's pay them less or whatever. And so they stirred up a hornet's nest in the community because they went ahead with this, and there was no discussion with the community. They blindsided them.
It was clearly a negotiating tactic. How a few days later do you all of a sudden have a contract that you're all agreeing to?
Right.
I mean, come on, that's just. It's. I mean. I feel for the people at Forest Lake who came to those meetings and pleaded their case, even though some of them were Section 8s. They were nuts. Sorry, some of them were. Oh, I'm scared. Come on, geez. Don't you move to Forest Lake so that you don't have to lock your door at night? I mean, it was, some of the people were way over the top, but I would be even more pissed off now to see, okay.
You got played.
Okay, we won't do it now. Here's a new agreement. The union's voting tomorrow. What? See, I mean, they just lack credibility now. And quite frankly, the people who voted no probably knew the same thing was going on.
Right.
Where were they saying, hey, look, you agree to this contract and this discussion's over. Yeah. I mean, it should have never gotten to this point.
No. So, I mean, if you live in Forest Lake, I really think you need to take a look long and hard about getting involved in your community like we always talk about, because their council people are going to be ripe for the picking.
Right. And back it up a second.
Yeah.
If this is going on in Forest Lake, take a look at any city that size or smaller.
Yep.
And they're probably going to have the same discussion now. And that's true. Okay.
Yeah.
They can have that discussion. I'm all for that. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to see a repeat of what happened here. I don't want a work session discussion that nobody hears, and then nobody finds out about it till a vote is about to be taken.
Right.
If you're going to talk about this, you should talk about it at a meeting, on camera. You should have an open house, a town hall.
Yep.
The police department should be involved in it.
Yep.
The police department's not the city's enemy. You can go about it one way, the right way or the wrong way. And you can see look, city council people, look what happened in Forest Lake. You want that to be your city? This is the consequence of not involving citizens at the last minute. They're all pissed off. They're all emotional. They're all, hey, wait a minute here. What do you mean Officer Charlie, who lives down the street's going to be... when did that happen? I mean,
right.
it's... but I'm telling you, this is one thing I'm going to say, though. I'll say this unequivocally. The conversation about county law, city law, shared services, things like that, joint powers agreements, that is only going to increase, not decrease around here. It will increase, especially in the first and second ring suburbs, especially in where there's a big city and there's townships or small towns around it. They probably already have something in place. And I'm here to tell you that this conversation is going to go on and probably never end. So get ready for it.
Absolutely. So you got to know where you stand. And, this conversation that Andrew and I just had, it's an important one for you to have with your neighbors, with your friends, with your family.
Can't people sit down like you and I and just have a rational discussion about it? What happened to that? How come we can't do that anymore?
I don't know. Why does it always have to become, oh, you don't agree with me, you hate me?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Why?
Little emotional intelligence goes a long way.
But you and I sat here and laid out pros and cons. We sort of nodded our head at both.
Yeah.
If I was on the Forest Lake City Council, I don't know how I'd vote because it would depend on the contract.
Right.
So I guess I'm kind of in the middle, probably leaning towards a no. But under the right circumstances, I could see how this could work, and I could see how this could be a flipping disaster.
Right.
So it's a tough vote, but again, the rational debate, and I think every city should be having this debate, a frank and honest discussion. We can't be afraid to have debates. We can't be afraid to disagree. We can't be afraid to find common ground with somebody that we ordinarily disagree with.
Right.
Because you'd be surprised at these city and county levels how you can get things done when it's not about who's Republican, who's Democrat,
right,
who's this or that. So I think we're also missing the rational, calm, honest debate that, quite frankly, Forest Lake citizens deserve.
Right.
They deserve that because the police department and the council serve at their pleasure. Period.
That's it. And some of your cities, some of your counties may have commissions and boards that oversee the police department, the fire department, things like that. Get on one if that's an issue that gets you.
What is that in Crystal? They have something.
It's law enforcement task force or something like that.
Jeez, I don't have time to Google it. There is something that, and there's neighborhood watch groups. We've set that up before a long time ago. Crystal Police came, and they were terrific.
Yeah.
They were great, and they were really encouraging of citizens to sort of be watchdogs, take it upon themselves, defend their own property. They were good at explaining, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do.
Right.
Which I think helped. So I think, those are all options. And I would encourage people who live in Forest Lake, don't drop this after this debacle.
You can't.
You can't just now all of a sudden not pay attention.
Yeah. Oh, it's okay now.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Police department say, believe me, they're going to start discussing the next contract next week. Okay. The people in charge, which is usually in a city of that size, is probably an HR assistant city manager person and a finance person who are going to do the minutia of a contract with a union rep. or union council or whatever it is, whoever represents the police department. I don't know who that is, but those talks are going to be ongoing, and this is an issue you can't afford to ignore for the next 2 years or whatever the contract is for. 3 years, maybe, was it? I don't remember. We looked before we got on the air, and I can't remember now. Because there was a length with Washington County and a length with the union. I don't remember what it was. So, you got to stay on top of this. And if they're in talks about the police department, I don't know what the fire department or the park board or, they're looking at it, or their neighbors are looking at it. This is your County Road 81.
Yeah. It is.
To do something.
If you've heard our story before, you know what that means.
Right.
And that is where we were born out of. That's where the fire that we were tried under. And I
thank the old city council every day. They have us. They are to blame for our existence.
It's good stuff. Tell you what. So I would say this. If you're in Forest Lake, but not just Forest Lake. If you're in Hugo, if you're in Andover, if you're in Onamia, if you're in
Lino Lakes,
Albert Lee,
or more importantly, a small town around that.
Yeah.
What's going on there? How many do citizens even know?
Right. You need to be involved. And a lot of places you're going to be able to find your city council meetings online, and you can watch those till the cows come home, but it's those work sessions that you're really going to learn things from, because that's where people speak their mind. That's where they hash out their disagreements. You're not usually going to see things like this like what happened in Forest Lake. You're usually not going to see that in a city council meeting because they've already discussed it.
And trust me, it wouldn't have been discussed if the citizens didn't show up.
Yep.
If the police officers and citizens are on whatever side they were on, did not come there.
Yeah.
There's no way Channel 4 and Channel 5 would be on this like they are. It was the citizens coming. Again, whatever you believe in from this aspect of this story.
I would imagine even the police union pushed this out to the news organizations, and somehow the people caught wind of it.
It could have been that. Yeah. And again, it's up to people to decipher that. But I think the fact that so many citizens were caught off guard by it galvanized the public. Maybe if we had 6 months of discussion and presentation and, here's what will happen if we do this, you wouldn't have seen what you saw at that meeting.
So, and I don't say this kind of thing very often, but maybe y'all should thank the police union for assisting in this for you. But it shouldn't come to that, because what happens when they pass the next comprehensive plan and they decide that they're gonna totally tear down and rebuild a part of your city, or they're going to put through a highway and turn it from 4 lanes into 6 lanes, or they're going to create green spaces and spend money for these green ways that go from park to park to park. Nobody is going to stand up for you at that point, and nobody is going to say, hey, these things are coming. They're just going to come. There might be an open house. Most people don't go to the open houses. And you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised when you find out that your neighbor across the road is losing their house and you can't do anything to help them save it because they're going to put up a medical center.
Or the place you get your car fixed has been deemed for redevelopment for a high-density senior building or something.
And these aren't hypotheticals. These are things that are actually real-world examples. And so all the more important why you need to be involved in your city commissions. You have to get involved, and this is why, because these things go unnoticed until you have such a big wedge issue like this that you have somebody with some money and power willing to speak out.
And you think about it, I'll say one last thing about it. This police department debate, this county city thing, is not about liberal conservative, it's not about Republican Democrat. This is something you and I have harped on. Crystal Airport was not a Democratic position and a Republican position.
Right.
County Road 81, there was not a Republican position and a Democratic position.
Right.
People from on both sides of the aisle were all over the place on this.
Yeah.
You know, and you could find those issues where you can test a person in office's integrity, honesty, willingness to work, willingness to listen, willingness to debate. Or if somebody tells you, and I won't mention names, I won't talk about any former mayors, who basically tell you if you don't like what's going on in your city, go move to the middle of nowhere. You can decipher a lot about somebody's character.
Leadership ability.
Through these types of things.
Yeah.
Period.
Absolutely. So, with that said, we're looking for you. If you're interested in being on a commission, if you're interested in heading up an activist group like we do, and blogging and podcasting, going to meetings, helping to find people to run for office, all of that kind of stuff, we really want to hear from you. We want to help you to be able to get to a place where you're affecting change in your community. And it's happening everywhere. Every city in Minnesota, there are things that need to be set right. And some places you're going to find city councils that are going to get it when you explain it to them. But a lot of them, I'm sorry, they're going to need to probably retire and go do whatever it is they do on Tuesday nights or Monday nights. They can go back to watching football and whatever it is.
The AT&T Chrysler Golf Classic.
Yeah. So I'm telling you, it is easy to affect change, and we'll have more on this kind of stuff later. I know out in Big Lake they've started their comp plan commissions, and we're watching that pretty closely. That's why it's important that you be involved, because I'm going to tell you right now, those folks are pretty surprised at what is being proposed and what is being said about what they want their city to become. So we'll talk more about that in future podcasts. But for you, get involved. If you want to get involved, if you want to run for office, if you want to do any of the stuff that I mentioned, get a hold of us. Our email is commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. commsolutionsmn@gmail.com. Or if you have a story about what's going on in your city, you want us to look into something, go ahead and get a hold of us. Otherwise, go to our blog, commsolutionsmn.com, and make sure you share our stories on social media, stuff like that, because that's how this stuff gets around, and we stand up and we make a change. So with that said, I want to thank you so much for listening to our podcast again. We have loved to see the spike in numbers of people coming and noticing what we're doing, spreading the word. It's getting more popular. We're gaining steam. They're losing steam. We are marching to the goal line. They are being backed up into a base defense. I tell you, we are going to be able...
Prevent.
Well, the prevent's when there's lots of room. We're getting close, I'm telling you.
True.
That's true. You can't back a safety up 15 yards when you're on the 5.
Bust through the goal line.
Yeah. All right. Enough said. I'm telling you, we're on the move, and we want you to be a part of this movement. So get a hold of us, all right? Until next time, want you guys to keep your nose on the internet, keep your eyes on your city council. We're coming for you. All right. Good night.
to